Brandon Bozarth is the founder of Integrated Somatic Inquiry, ISI, a process that deals with the root cause of our mental/emotional suffering and physical disease. Pairing ISI with his extensive understanding of Germanic Healing Knowledge, or GHK, also known as German New Medicine, Brandon deals with healing at the root cause level. Working with over 1,000 clients in over 20 countries, his work has been taught in workshops, retreats, stages, and online courses all over the world over the past 9 years. His clients have seen improvements and have resolved depression, or maybe we could say dissolved, maybe at some point, dissolved depression, cancer, arthritis, psychosis, anxiety, skin rashes, grief, IBS, and many other psychosomatic symptoms. Okay, so I've been homies with you for a while, and I know you were super interested in an inquiry, which we'll get to later in this episode, but what tipped you off to German New Medicine?
I mean, I think technically I first heard of it through you. I think I saw you share something.
I've done some episodes with Melissa, and I was pretty big on it.
Yeah. I think it was an interview you did with Melissa, and I just started investigating her work. Honestly, I mean, like so many of us, it was, mainstream medicine and then functional. And then I discovered the Falsity of Germ Theory in 2020 or maybe in 19. And no, 2020.
Because you had read Goodbye Germ Theory by Dr. Wiltshire.
And I did a whole series on it because it completely blew my mind, made so much sense. Yep. And I was, a terrain theorist pretty heavily. And then I still couldn't really reconcile, okay, and why do some people in the same terrain have really intense chronic symptoms and some don't, that are living in the same home and they're eating the same thing and they're living on the same Wi-Fi? It's like, what's the differential? And with my background, before GNM, I had clients that were resolving physical ailments. We wouldn't call them ailments in GNM. And I just always put it off as, oh yeah, it's like energy precedes form.
Right.
And so, of course, if you change the energetic context in which that person's body is arising and living within, the body's going to change to match that energetic shift. So, people call those miracles. So I would just say, oh yeah, we shifted at the core and the body followed. And it just always made perfect sense to me. But then in hindsight, through the podcast and through starting to study German medicine, not all of them, but a lot of the physical symptoms that previous clients resolved mapped perfectly onto GNM. I had this woman resolve breast cancer in her right breast. She was right-handed, so it was partner side. And she had a nest worry conflict. This is German New Medicine terminology, which basically means she had her partner moved in, but he didn't have a job. So she started to provide for him and her, and she could barely make ends meet. And it created this worry. Oh, are we going to make ends meet? Is my partner just going to freeload off of me? I don't want this, but I'm experiencing. It's like she was so conflicted around her nest associated with her partner's recent entering of her nest that she developed breast cancer in the right breast. And we went to a retreat with both of them there. We resolved the tension and the conflict between them. She completely had this deep emotional release. And at the time, we didn't even know she had breast cancer. She withheld that from us.
Wow.
2 weeks later, she got a scan, and then she messages me and goes, Brandon, I didn't tell you guys this, but I had breast cancer before this retreat, and I was scheduled for a surgery 2 weeks after our work. And now she goes, and she sends me the scans. She goes, they went to scan it and go, okay, ready for your surgery. Let's just double check it's the right breast. Oh, maybe it's in the other one. Oh, you're cancer free.
Wow.
And I'm, it wasn't necessarily surprising for me based on my understanding of just physics, energy to form. But then when
you didn't have a framework.
I didn't have a framework.
Right.
Then when German New Medicine hit, it was like, oh, that's a nest worry conflict with the partner.
So again, this was in hindsight.
This was 2 years later.
Wow.
3 years later, actually. And it blew my mind. And so I started to really see German New Medicine probably in like the 90 to 95 percentile of my direct experience working with clients and them resolving mapped right over German New Medicine. And I just kept seeing it validated in my direct experience. And about a year of that, I developed a chronic condition for the first time in my life a little over a year and a half ago. It was mainly insomnia, just being conflict active, but it was indigestible morsel. I didn't know at the time, but it was also anemia. And so incredible fatigue, incredible brain fog, could barely sleep. And it lasted for maybe 8 or 9 months. And I stopped working. And at that point, I had tried the fasting, herbs, detox, carnivore, nearly everything, you know.
Would
And
any of those things provide temporary
temporary
relief?
I'd do carnivore, I'd get a little more energy, but
Mhm.
my sleep wouldn't. It might improve by like an hour,
Mhm.
but you know when the underlying condition is there because you know what it's like to feel totally you.
Right.
And so even when I was doing that, I was like, I'm doing this, but I'm kind of like extracting energy from the herbs and the diet. And I know without it, I'm going to feel like crap. So it still wasn't empowering. And I felt like I wasn't getting to the root.
Mhm.
So I felt like all I was left with was Germany medicine. And out of
Wow.
my own, honestly, moments of desperation, like I can't live not sleeping and with this much, like I thought I had dementia, and I probably actually did have early
Holy
stage dementia because of the intense.
What is dementia in Germany medicine again?
It's a separation conflict.
Okay. It's like wanting to forget, right?
Yeah, it's your brain going, that was so painful. We're gonna hide it. Hide it, lahayim. We're gonna hide it from you, to protect you from what just happened.
Yeah.
So your short-term memory goes out the window. And I have a client and friend who works in memory care,
Mhm.
and the patients that are the worst off with dementia, on repeat, like a broken record, they're repeating the last separation conflict with usually someone in their family over and over. Oh, what John? Where is he?
Wow.
I just want to see him.
You see that in movies too.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in movies when someone has dementia or Alzheimer's, where they're like bringing up someone.
There's one conflict that they're ruminating on, and it's
Yeah.
been so long. Couple that with an American diet that says don't eat fat.
Right.
Now you're depriving the brain of everything it needs to be sharp, and you have an epidemic of dementia.
Yeah.
Because you have an epidemic of people not resolving their conflicts when it comes to their intimate family relationships. And usually it's older because this is when, you know, deaths in the family happen. You're dealing with estates.
Mhm.
You're dealing with different philosophies and ways of raising children from generation to so much potential
Maybe
for conflict.
kids don't want to talk with you, so
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's how my grandma passed ultimately. She had
Wow.
only saw it in hindsight. She had one interaction with my uncle, and it just destroyed her. Really intense, nasty argument. And she just wanted to be close to him, and he refused to talk to her. A year later, she
Mhm.
developed dementia, and then she lived for another maybe 4 or 5 years. So anyway, I say all that to say I was at a place with my health where I just said nothing else is working.
Mm.
This German medicine thing philosophically makes a lot of sense, rings true for me. And that was the beginning.
Wow. I have come to the same conclusion, and I have a little bit of a different take, which, you know, we'll talk about like the nuances on Germany medicine here, but that the overwhelming majority of symptoms of illness are related to some emotional conflict. I 100% agree with that. I'm saying like the overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
I mean, I've shared this a couple times on the show, but for the sake of this, because we're talking about Germany medicine, I had a conflict, you know, where I was separated from my mom, where my mom and I weren't speaking. And I also had what Germany medicine calls a track, which I'll ask you about, we'll get into. And every time I would get triggered related to this, my mom, and being separate of her, just because our relationship wasn't good, the days after that, I would get a rash on the right side of my forehead. And according to Germany medicine, because I'm left-handed, my mother's side is my right side. So, and this also deals with like self-esteem related stuff. So the self-image rather. And so that rash popping up on my right side was related directly to a separation conflict, and it was on my mother's side. And it was related to my self-image as well, because my mom's also very public. So it all made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty crazy to me.
I had this client, she goes, my dad talked to me the other day and admitted to me that he's felt like a failure of a dad his entire life. And this is like after they're doing some deep repair work. And I'll tell you, very few don't, I'd say like 99% of conflict happen in relationship. They end up being resolved in relationship, even if you're not physically with the person. Your relationship to the person has to change internally.
Internally.
Yeah. So she had this conversation, and he admitted that, and he had this big cry. And I just go, I can't take credit for this. This is all Dr. Hammer in German medicine. Go, did he have chronic right knee pain? She goes, he had a knee replacement in that knee. Feeling like he couldn't perform as a dad so intensely that he had to replace his knee because of the cell loss in his right knee.
Yeah.
So what's cool about German medicine is you can just see people's bodies and symptoms and start totally understanding the narratives in which they live.
Yeah, incredible. I think to set the context, I've talked about Germany medicine before. I interviewed Melissa on either episode 5 or episode 6, which was quite good. We went into it, but for those who are new, we might want to just get into some of the basics of Germany medicine.
Yeah.
So, is it more appropriate to talk about like what a DHS is or the 5 biological laws? I know those tie in.
Yeah, I'll give just some of the fundamentals for the context. Maybe avoid going into the whole story because it's pretty long, but
I think that was the whole episode with Melissa, so people can just refer back to that one.
Yeah. So. Just in short, Dr. Hammer discovered what are now called the 5 biological laws, but it originated with his first discovery, which I would say is the most significant, is that the origin of all disease begins in the psyche, then affects the brain, then affects the organ. Now that implies that bacteria and viruses, except for not bacteria and viruses, but things like malnutrition and poisoning, that's in a separate category, but that's affecting 1% of the population. So 98% of the time, it's the root cause of disease originates in the psyche. So it's a non-physical origination. Another way to say energetic. And that energy precedes the form. And so you can take a symptom and you can trace it. They're like windows into the psyche, each symptom, and you can trace it back to what's happening in the psyche. When you resolve the conflict in the psyche, you have a cascading effect of healing. We call that cascading effect symptoms. In traditional Western medicine paradigm, you go, I'm sick, something's wrong, my body's breaking down.
Even a lot of holistic paradigms.
Even a lot of holistic, I know. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A lot of holistic paradigms are still in the drama triangle. I'm a victim to viruses, bacteria, or the chemtrails.
Right.
And so I'll still look for a savior. It's just an upgraded savior because it's not like I'm empowered to save myself through herbs.
Right.
Through controlling my environment.
Right.
So there's still an underpinning implication of I'm not free and there's something outside causing me these symptoms, as if the symptoms are wrong or bad in the first place. Which, if you understand the nature of symptoms, that whole chain of logic doesn't make any sense anymore.
Right.
There's no reason to blame the chemtrails for your symptoms, because with the understanding of German medicine, symptoms are, you should be you should be celebrating the symptoms that arise, even if it's a track. I mean, I teach my clients, and we'll distinguish that in a moment. If you're stepping on a track, it's still really good information because it contains the DHS, and the information in that moment where you step on the track that contains the DHS is your body trying to resolve something it's ruminating on. So we're going to step on, stepping on a track is like the DHS desperately trying to be discovered.
Totally makes sense. Even in my experience, like when I had that track keep occurring with my mom, when I reframed it as like, fuck, why does this keep happening? It was like, oh, what a gift that I keep getting triggered by this, because that's just showing me there's something more inside me related to this experience or this story that I need to resolve.
Yeah.
Like that's the way that I looked at it. And then that, for the most part, has stopped happening. I mean, I still sometimes get a little tiny bit here, but not as much as I did before.
Yeah.
It is sincerely stopped. So you mentioned DHS. What is a DHS?
Yeah. So named after Dr. Hammer's son, Dirk Hammer syndrome, is what is visible on a CT scan where an event occurs in your life where you were caught off guard or caught on the wrong foot, you're overwhelmed or shocked, and there's some sense of isolation. Any event where your internal response to that event contain those 3 criteria, when they all hit at once, your body will adapt. And that adaptation, the control center of your body, of your experience, is your brain. So boom, you'll have a circular imprint in a certain part of your brain that turns on an SBS, or a special biological program, and says, your life's in danger. Because think about in nature, if you're shocked and overwhelmed, caught on the wrong foot, and isolated, that means death. That's in very simple terms, That's you walking through the forest and a lion jumping out at you. If you're not with a lot of people, you're probably going to die. Isolation. If you're with a huge tribe, you're probably going to be fine. They could fight it off. You're overwhelmed, obviously, and you're caught on the wrong foot. 9 times out of 10 in our evolutionary history, that means death. So your body goes, if the purpose of our biology is reproduction and to survive, it will, through millions of years of evolution and learning, turn on some program that gives you a super sense or temporary ability to deal with the situation. Because we live so far removed from nature, we have abnormally lengthy conflict active phases.
Right.
Because again, with tribe, you always have a place in the tribe. Like everyone has a distinguished job or way of contributing. So the like prefrontal cortex, or the most recent developed part of the brain that has to do with belonging and shame and this sort of thing, you're for the most part taken care of in a tribe. You know where you belong, and if there's conflict, it's because you have a vital role in a tribe, the entire tribe, it's in their best interest to make sure you resolve any conflict with any other members.
Totally.
And so, and you always you have the medicine woman to go to for your, your spiritual issues, and it so much is taken care of just by living biologically and naturally, that you may have the same conflicts, but they're incredibly short. This is why tribes don't have the same amount of chronic disease.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
As we do. And so DHS is the adaptation. Give you an example, indigestible morsel. If I eat a rock, my brain will turn on, and you could see this with the CT scan, which is what Dr. Halmer discovered in the 80s, that my brain, what that controls my intestines, this circle would appear, and it would create cell proliferation in my intestines. That would in turn create more digestive juice and acids to break down that stone that I just ate. And once it's able to be broken down enough and safely pass, I would start cramping. Cramping is moving the morsel through your digestive tract. And then when it's fully ready to go, I would have diarrhea, which is like, blast that stone out.
Blast
it out, and also all of the extra bacteria that's no longer needed, all the extra acid that's not needed, get it all out. It's not needed.
Or even parasites in some contexts, like, like I passed parasites, that means I killed the parasites. And it's like, no. They were doing an important role inside of you more than
the body. This is also what Dr. Harmon discovered. The body programs things like parasites and bacteria to do very specific jobs that work in perfect synergy with the body.
Right.
You get in the functional world. Oh, you feel lethargy? It's because you have an overgrowth of just kill all the bacteria and you'll be fine.
Right.
And I'm like,
or it's a parasite, or it's dormant Epstein-Barr virus that has become triggered again.
It's dormant. That just reminds
everything.
me.
Dude, that is like the functional medicine community. I don't want to speak for all functional medicine practitioners, but the overwhelming majority that I've come across is like, okay, yeah, we recognize vaccines are bad, but everything is caused by parasites, mold, Epstein-Barr virus, or something like that, or Lyme, or like dormant Lyme disease or something like that.
Reminds me of the COVID era where it was like, not having symptoms is also a symptom. You have dormant COVID, like stay in, it's like kind of the same thing. It's like, oh, you have a dormant virus. It's dormant, but it's the cause. It's like, what does that even mean? But anyway, it just, it perpetuates the paradigm that there's something at cause outside of ourselves that we can't control, that its nature is to kill us, which violates the observable laws in nature. You don't see a tree trying to kill another tree for no meaningful reason that doesn't benefit the whole ecosystem.
Right.
To kill, just to kill, or to attack, just to attack. There's no meaningful reason in nature that would happen.
Which is why viruses made absolutely zero sense. And of course, Germany medicine acknowledges that viruses don't even exist, and they're focused on bacteria, fungi, and sort of the pleomorphic cycle as it relates to specific biological conflicts, right? So with this example you're just talking about with the rock, the thing that is so interesting is it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that makes sense that our body does that with a rock, that it does like the proliferation of tissue in order to like get that out and like digestive juices, and then you pass a bunch of bacteria, have diarrhea, et cetera, et cetera. But it's so hard for some people, especially if they're new to German medicine, to wrap their head around. All of that same stuff happens related to an indigestible morsel that is just in the psyche.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like not swallowing a rock.
A psyche rock.
Right, a psyche rock.
Yeah.
Is that what you call it?
Starting now.
Okay, so like explain how in Germany medicine use exact same example,
Yeah.
but frame it from a Germany medicine lens related to something that is emotional.
Yeah. So indigestible morsels often, the shittier the experience, the deeper in the digestive tract it hits.
Mhm.
And this is why we use biological language. God, it was such a shitty situation. And we're pointing to where it's actually hitting our biology, not even knowing it.
Yeah.
Because we do know it on the deepest levels. An example could be any experience of like betrayal, and you feel so enraged. How could this person do this to me? How could they lie? How could they steal? Whatever the situation was, but you're unable to digest the experience. So it might be in your psyche, no, I don't accept that this has happened. And now I need to spend energy making sure it doesn't happen again. And that's suffering, because we start living in time. We start living to avoid an unreconciled experience from the past. And that's like driving. It's like getting into a car accident and then driving, but staring in your rearview mirror and going, okay, I hope I don't get in that accident. And I hope I don't get in that accident. And as long as that's ruminating in your psyche, your body's perceiving itself as still in the accident. It's still a threat. And what happens when you drive a car staring in the rearview mirror? You end up recreating it over and over. We can call those tracks, but tracks are just really anything we've associated to the original DHS. It could be a smell. It could be a food. I'll give an example for like peanut butter, for example. How many kids grew up eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? I did.
Uncrustables,
I still
baby.
do.
Dude, the Uncrustables.
Yeah, Uncrustable. Wonder Bread.
Wonder Bread. That shit was horrible for me, but very good.
But delicious.
Right.
So how many conflicts, as a kid, we have many, it's all about our first time experiences for everything. So we're having a lot of DHSs because we're surprised a lot. And if we're eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches almost every day, we might end up associating the peanut butter with the DHS. Because maybe we were eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while we watched our parents argue. And then the body goes, the peanut butter is a threat. My parents are a threat. Yelling itself is a threat. This season is a threat. It just depends on how your body is unconsciously trying to protect you. And it will tag certain things in your environment. And that's how allergies are developed. So back to indigestible morsel, as long as the experience you had remains resisted, you'll continue to turn on, maybe temporarily turn off, but in between that turning on of the program, the indigestible morsel program, and turning off, that process of not letting it heal is chronic disease, or as in German medicine, they call it a hanging healing. And so in this case,
because you're not allowing it to fully resolve. It keeps coming back and going, coming back and going.
Yeah, you might have a temporary, you might like go on vacation and change your environment, get off, not step on any tracks, and give yourself so much permission to just relax that it downgrades to the point that you don't even notice any symptoms. And then you get that one text message and then boom, it blows up again. Yeah. Right.
Or a lot of people go on vacation and then they experience symptoms while they're on vacation. Do you think it's because they're out of the conflict phase?
Yeah, they're unconsciously resolving a conflict.
Right.
Then they come back home and then it all reignites.
Can we explain the difference in general? Again, we don't need to get in the 5 biological laws, but between the conflict phase and then the healing phase.
Yeah. Conflict phase, cold hands, cold feet. Your what's called sympaticotonic. It's a hard word. Something like that.
Got it.
It's where you're essentially in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And you're in the active adaptation phase, which is only there's 2 adaptations, cell loss or cell increase. And each adaptation is for the biological, it's an advantage for your biology. It's
always related to a specific set of emotional experiences.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So you've had a DHS and your body's going into, okay, how can I help this person adapt? For, let's say, a morsel conflict involving the thyroid. This is what happened to my dad. My dad has cancer and he's resolved, he got his thyroid removed, but his original conflict was feeling too slow to get a morsel. So what does your body do? if you have a DHS around being too slow to get a morsel.
Did that actually come up in his life too? Like
Yeah,
that specific thing?
I'll tell you how it happened, because we went on a walk and I'm just like, I learned about this. I'm like, Dad, before you had cancer, did you feel, and like, just, if it's not true, that's okay. You don't have to find this to be true, but did you have like a season of life where you just felt way too slow around something? He's like, wow, that is so weird that you said that, because for 2 years in my job, I was untrained. Like, his training is in water heaters, like, and high-tech heating systems for homes and installing them. That position was already filled. He was had a new job, and they put him into something he didn't have much training to do. And he was always like doing the job hours beyond the time allotted. Like, he needed more time because he was figuring it out as he was going. So he'd constantly be getting these calls. All right, we need you to hurry up. Like, you're running behind. We need you to hurry up. And he'd be stressed out.
Wow.
And like, he's supporting our entire family. So it would make sense. He's shocked that, you know, maybe the call caught him by surprise. Hey, you're too slow. But the overwhelm is, I'm not going to be able to, you know, support my family. They could die. I might not be able to support myself. I mean, it's all reptilian brain.
Right.
And being overwhelmed. I don't know how to do this, but I'm under the pressure of the clock. You know, like, I have to go. So he had 2 years of that. I go, when did your cancer develop? He goes, I think like a month after I switched positions. He's like, they finally put me in the boiler unit. And yeah, I felt way better. And I had to confront my boss and say, look, I can't do this anymore. I need a different position. Okay, you can go here. And then boom, all the swelling happened in his thyroid. Because his thyroid, well, I'll just say this for the adaptation. His thyroid was, he was in hyperthyroidism. His body was going, oh, you're too slow. Give him more thyroid hormone to make him faster so he can do the job. But when you do that for 2 years, your rebound phase is going to be hypothyroidism. And all of the cell, in that case, it would be cell proliferation, has to start to digest and leave the thyroid because it's no longer needed. So it swells to bring in water and blood, which is inflammation, to bring in the bacteria, nature's surgeons, to eat away all those extra cells and dispose of them. So he got inflamed, boom, right away, and then went and had it removed.
Man, and it's so crazy that Western medicine is so off base that they would then look at, oh, thyroid, something wrong, let's just remove it. Like, that is crazy. Especially when you understand that, no, this is healing. And that's, I think, the largest flip, both the terrain model of health and Germany medicine, which pair perfectly with each other overwhelmingly, is flipping to understand that symptoms are not bad. And it's like, people be like, yeah, but what about this symptom? Or what about these chronic symptoms? I'm like, no. Symptoms, period, ever. Every single one of them. None of them are bad. They are all the solution. Now, are some way worse than the other ones? Do some last longer? Yes. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, according to Germany medicine, it's all related to how the length of the conflict. Right?
That's right. And, you know, most conflict or most healing phases will actually resolve it within 8 weeks. There's some that go longer, but most will resolve within 8 weeks. Some, no matter how long the conflict was, especially morsel conflicts, things that involve fevers and night sweats. If you're in that kind of symptomology, 8 weeks or less, usually 2, 3, 4. Even certain heart, I was working with a guy who had territory loss, and his blood pressure went through the roof. I mean, their doctors are like, your blood's ragu. We've never seen this thick of blood, you know? He's like, you need to have cholesterol medication. He comes to me, high cholesterol is the healing phase. I'll have to double check this, but I believe it's of territory loss.
What is territory loss, real quick?
For him, it was losing his ex-partner.
Wow.
So men consider women their territory.
Makes sense.
They consider women their territory.
Makes sense from a biological perspective.
Right, because we have to be possessive and we have to protect. Because again, in the pecking order, the alpha gets all the women. That's the original design. And then a man that fails to become the alpha, their testosterone gets lowered by failing to become the alpha, so they can become more like women, so they can get the protection of the alpha. This is why we have an epidemic of a
bunch of
Nancy boys. No, it's really just a biological adaptation to try to find the pecking order. But so yeah, his territory loss was his woman, and he had 2 years of being conflict active. And once we started working together, if he were to use the cholesterol medication, it would have extended his healing phase maybe by another 8 to 10 to 12 weeks. He didn't use any of it. High cholesterol is the liver putting more fat into the blood, so the fat can create a better environment for the bacteria to heal all of the cell loss in the heart. And in 8 weeks after resolving the conflict, he was fine. No more heart murmur, like heart pain. He had probably a couple mini heart attacks, but it was just, like a cramp, like a muscle cramp, but he anticipated that happening. That's part of the healing phase. Yeah. Every symptom, very few are not healing phase symptoms. Right. Really only migraines. Well,
even if they are like legit poisoning or something like that, it's still, okay, my body is responding. This is solution. At least it's alerting me like, fuck, I was just poisoned. Someone just, poisoned my drink with, I don't know, formaldehyde or something like that. Right. But with, what was I going to say? The Germany, so like from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the overwhelming majority, yes, like of symptoms of illness arise as a result of our psyche, of our emotional attachment to a certain situation, or like our story surrounding it, right? But there has been a few experiences, both with myself and with other people that I've talked to, where their symptoms, they looked, according to German New Medicine, they could not reconcile the symptoms that they were experiencing with the attributed emotional conflict as laid out by German New Medicine. And it was still that they were clear that, okay, in this case, yes, like my emotions led to this healing phase of symptoms that I'm experiencing, which was the solution again. But the emotions that I experienced were not in line with this set of symptoms, according to German New Medicine. Have you come across that too?
100%. Yeah. I don't treat German New Medicine. I did kind of in the beginning, but I don't treat it as a religion. Like everything is true and I'm just going to take it at face value. In my own direct experience, I've had people have an indigestible morsel connected to sexuality. We were talking about this. And the traditional GNMers go, oh no, that's impossible. It must be something else. And I witnessed them literally share the morsel that was keeping them or making it make sense to hold on to that shame. And really they just had to see their own innocence. What I love about this work is it always comes back to the same thing. GNM will ultimately point us to really basic teachings. We need to forgive ourselves, see the innocence in ourselves and others. That's it. And what happens in forgiveness and innocence? We stop fighting against an experience. And that is the nature of suffering, not our experience, the fighting against an experience. So when we're able to forgive and see innocence, we can digest experiences, the anger dissipates, we move through all of it. And she did that in front of 15 people and had this massive release. And in front of all of us, her guts start rumbling. Everyone could hear it and she's in pain. And I know now, at the time I didn't know about German New Medicine, but you can hear the indigestible morsel program coming on because you could hear the cramping literally. And she runs to the bathroom, has her first solid bowel movement in 6 months.
Wow.
Comes back glowing. And she goes, I think I'm totally healed of this IBS. And I just have this feeling that all of my allergies are gone too. She was allergic to 30 different things. Doctor just did a test, I think the week prior, said 30 different foods you have allergies to. She was only on liquids.
Wow.
She comes back, she goes, I just have a feeling I could eat anything I want. Goes into the kitchen, we're at this retreat, eats everything she was allergic to, is perfectly fine, and it's never come back. Now, that wasn't from indigestible anger. It wasn't from,
and that's what German New Medicine would say, that it's indigestible anger, to that or another type of that indigestible something.
Yeah, they might agree and say, yeah, it could be indigestible shame, but if it's related to sexuality, they'd go, no, it would hit the sexual organs. And I have to believe my direct experience.
Right.
So when I see this person go, no, that it's connected to sexuality, but for some reason her psyche interpreted it as a morsel conflict, not as sexual frustration, not as a sexual conflict, not as a reproduction conflict, not any of those traditional conflicts. That's just unique to her psyche. So you have to, and again, language is a barrier. Totally. And this is also kind of a materialistic point of view. If I'm too fixated on the word, I'm overlooking the energy in which the word is being informed from.
Right.
And so if I'm fixated on the word, I can't feel and really listen with the patient or the client that I'm working with at what sound or vibration or field of energy is being suppressed. We use words to open that energy up so it can be moved and no longer repressed. But the words are less important than noticing how to communicate with this very individualized psyche.
Right.
And so to try to fit it into a map is a result of materialism. No, the map is the key.
Right.
The words are the key. No, none of that is actually, those are all tools to point to.
They're helpful tools.
They're helpful tools.
Right. They're helpful
But let's
tools.
not get caught up on this is the right tool or the wrong tool. Let's look at what the tool is pointing to and let the map become a lot more flexible.
Right. Man, that's such a refreshing approach, because I won't speak for like all German New Medicine people, but a lot of the ones that I come across are
Nazis.
Too soon? That was perfect. God. Oh man. Yeah. For lack of a better term, yes, they can be Nazis. No, but they can be like so by the book with Germany. I mean, from my understanding, there's even been like infighting in the German medicine community where like some people get cut off because they're not strictly going with what Dr. Hammer laid out. And it's like, no, he was a human being too. He may not have had the entire picture, although this is an incredible, almost always consistent framework.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I even acknowledge that, but it doesn't apply to every single circumstance.
Right.
And that's where we all have our individuated portion of consciousness of the whole that is able to create our own reality that is going to diverge from what is consistently the framework for literally anything.
Yeah.
For literally anything. I mean, how do you, let me ask you this, I guess. When it comes to, let's say, like legitimate poisons, does German New Medicine acknowledge them as legitimate poisons, or is it more about the story, or is it a combination of both? Like what are some examples of poisons in German New Medicine?
So, all of us have a poison load, and it's typically based on, our generalized constitution, which we can have a whole philosophical debate about what that constitutes. But it's very connected to your weight, to your actual body weight.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I guess that could make sense. Like your threshold is based on, that could make sense.
Yeah. So think of like a little kid. It's going to take a lot more poison for the adult versus a little kid.
Right.
Simply because of the size and your capacity to deal with it because of your size and your development. Right. So if you reach a toxic load point, you're going to have immediate symptoms. And this is where in the German medicine world, it goes, okay, 0, maybe 1%, 0.1% of chronic conditions are from poisoning. It's hard for me to buy into that because if you're not at a toxic load point, yes, through, the accumulation of toxins, there could be some general fatigue. So I'm not discounting that, but to hit the threshold point, you're going to be nauseous. You're going to be sweating. Your body's going to do all of its pathways to get that poison out
like crazy.
And those are acute symptoms, not chronic symptoms.
Right.
So when people, it's just the accumulation of toxins that are creating my chronic symptoms. You can bypass a chronic way of being, a chronic energy that is actually at the root and get yourself in a position of feeling even more powerless, because then you do all of the detoxes. And if it doesn't go away, then you feel more powerless. If it does go away, but then it comes back because you didn't get to the root, you feel more powerless.
This is where I think like the mechanism of action when it comes to detoxes, and I can only share my own experience here after doing a 15-day water fast. If we're presupposing or assuming rather that memory related to anything is stored in our cells, right? And then, let's assume that for a second. Let's play with that. Then when you're doing a detox, the most powerful component of a detox, like on my 15-day water fast, yes, some of my physical symptoms resolved, but it's funny because those physical symptoms I knew deep down were related to emotions. And when I was doing my water fast, the things that came up the most for me to face were my stories surrounding a lot of things and experience that I had where I was withholding, where other people had wronged me, or I had a story around them wronging me or something like that. And facing all of those things, I think, is a result of water fasting bringing up or uprooting those memories to be looked at, right? And I think that's ultimately what happens with a detox, because you talk to most people who do a hardcore detox, most people I've talked to say that the emotional component of it is the hardest part. So I think 100%. It's that detox, yes, maybe they're facilitating the, release of some physical toxins, but most importantly, they're facilitating the emotional release that is then allowing those memories to be shed from you and the stories surrounding them, which brings your body back into coherence.
Yeah. Well, again, we're only as free as our past is reconciled. So to the degree in which my past is unreconciled will be the degree in which I feel a limitation on my sense of freedom and peace now. And so when you go into a fast, your attention that's usually on food and your senses, pleasure, the taste, the texture, or if you're fasting from TV, anything that's pulling your attention out, your attention recedes back to its source, which is going to allow the bubbling up of your unconscious. This is why the simple things are the hardest things. Sitting down and doing nothing, if your attention's not placed on anything, is really hard, not because of the nature of sitting, but because all of your repressed emotion, and then with it, all of the mental images glued to those emotions are rising to the surface. This is why things like a dark room retreat are some of the hardest things to do, but also the most freeing, because your attention is no longer out, it's in. And you can surface what's underneath the surface.
Yeah.
And when that's resolved, your body goes, oh, I don't need to protect him from our past anymore, because our body, in a sense, until something's resolved, thinks it's still living in that past and wants to protect you from it. So it's like we have a part of ourself frozen in time. And when that attention recedes, we can start to reconcile and bring all those parts of us back into the present.
You talk about the initial conflict that happened with that peanut butter example, right? Like maybe you were eating peanut butter as your family was getting in an argument. So that's like what puts you on a track every time you eat peanut butter. What if it's something though that is so subconsciously or unconsciously rooted that you can't find the initial event that started that biological program that you're experiencing?
Yeah, I love this question. So what differentiates my work versus traditional GNMers is, number one, I don't believe, and some don't, but some do, I don't believe you need to find the original DHS in order to resolve it.
How can you in every situation?
Well, then you're getting into a whole conversation of philosophy of like, what's original cause?
Right.
Original cause would be, if we're thinking in terms of materialism, the Big Bang. If we're thinking in terms of spirit, it's the ever-present here and now.
Right.
So it's something that's intangible if I'm going to absolute cause, because what caused the Big Bang? Something intangible. I can't actually locate one single cause independent of all of life.
Right.
Because it's all happening to create a cause. What's the one isolated cause? There's nothing isolated.
Right.
It's life.
Right.
So instead of trying to find original cause, understand reality's holographic. And the short definition of that is every part contains the whole. So if I step on a track and I recreate, another way of saying this is, if I had trauma or a DHS, either one, I wouldn't say they're interchangeable, but I'll keep it German medicine, DHS at 5. And then from that moment, there's a way of adapting. Typically that's going to create a behavioral change as well. That behavioral change, actually the entire change in my personality, is going to attract my personal reality, right? Little Joe Dispenza. It's going to attract people and circumstances to validate this person that I've become, because the ego wants to be right so it can continue to protect you. And you keep creating evidence. I have to protect. I have to stay safe. And there's ways you go about life within those constraints. You'll attract circumstances to bring that to the surface. Any circumstance that attracts or that brings that specific DHS to the surface contains all of the information of the original DHS. So when someone, at 5 felt abandoned, if last week they felt abandoned because their friend didn't text them, the same part of the brain is lighting up that holds the same information as the original DHS. So I don't need to find original cause. I need to find one iteration of that original cause, which contains the same information as original cause.
Because then it's just your story around the process itself rather than the initial impact that you occurred that set off the process.
Exactly.
Right. That
Yep.
makes so much sense. And you've had success with this, with,
Oh, yeah.
with talking with a lot of people. Can you
Yep.
give some examples?
Yeah, well, I'll say on the philosophy side, then I'll give you an example. When you isolate one moment, I call this finding a frame. You have to find a frame in which the DHS is alive. You find that moment, you help the individual see, and you zoom out and go, okay, how many moments have you had like this? And usually it's uncountable. It's like thousands. This is how I've been living my life, especially people with chronic issues. So we'll find that frame. Think of a good example. I'll use abandonment for an example. I was helping this woman with the notorious KCT program, which is the kidney collecting tubules. It's what's responsible for water weight. Usually rapid weight gain after an intense event isn't actually fat, it's water.
Wow.
And it's the body going, we could be thrust out of our environment. We could be kicked out of our home, kicked out of the tribe. Hold on to water to make sure this human survives. We don't want to dry out.
Wow.
And so she was dealing with that. And okay, give me an example. And where I go is I follow the energy. This is the somatic part. I go, close your eyes, tune in, and just and we trust the first impression. At your first impression, what's the most intense moment where you felt abandoned? And for her, it wasn't necessarily at 5. It was like, or 10. It was like 3 weeks ago. And that was just most alive. So we'll bring that to the surface. And typically that's a track as well. So sometimes just doing that, symptoms might start flaring up even in the moment. I'll have to be talking to clients and we'll go into a memory and it's all like, oh, my shoulder's hurting and my right elbow. And it's like, did you feel like a failure as a partner? Yes. And that's, so we're bringing up what's happening in the psyche, and then in real time, their body's starting to be, the effect of that occurrence in the psyche. And so we'll go into the frame. Okay, the story is I was abandoned. So the first degree of separation is, okay, what happened? My mother left. My mother didn't believe me when I needed her. She abandoned me. So that's what happened. And that's all true and valid. And then we'll go into the story of what happened, which that's where conflict lies. It never lies in reality. It lies in our psyche and response to reality. So with that first degree of separation is, she didn't believe you. And what did you make it mean about you?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't care. She's abandoning me. We might go one layer deeper. What kind of person? I love this question. What must be true about you if you're the kind of person that a mother would abandon? What must be true about your core sense of self? And this is where we're not dealing with just perception. We're dealing with an identity. And the identity is a context that informs your perception. So we're not just dealing, just change how you think about it. No, there's an identity statement, which is an I am followed by anything. And it's usually an I am not. I am not loved. I am not important. I'm not cared about. I'm not wanted. And so we found that fundamental identity, which is, I think for her it was, I'm not loved. And so in that moment, the first degree is what hurt you in that moment, your mom not believing you or you believing that you weren't loved.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it was my belief. And at no fault of her own, because you can't change what you're unaware of.
Right.
And that engenders a lot of compassion. I wasn't aware. It's like me saying, hey, can you change that thing over there? What thing? I don't know. It's like, you can't, you're not aware.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to play out your conditioning until you see it. And so she was able to go, oh, that happened automatically at no fault of my own. I learned that and I played it out. And what hurt in that moment? My mother, or my story of my mother? Oh, my story of my mother. And then she was able to see, just sitting in that belief, is it a fundamental truth about who you are that you're not loved? I love Peter Crone. He says, if I were to open you up and look in your DNA, would it be written somewhere in your body, oh, this one's not loved? It's like, no. So where does that actually originate? In your body or in your mind? In your mind. And so we'll really sit kind of like in a meditation around this idea, the question of, is this true about who you are, or was that just a belief? And when they see it, and I love this question. If some people will say, yes, no, it is true, I'm not loved. And I love to ask, well, what's your evidence? And then they'll reference other points. And the more we bring a whole body of evidence into play and see that it's not true and ridiculous and makes no sense, the more it doesn't have foundation anymore.
Mm.
And so we're not trying to get rid of it. We're getting so close to it, and we're trying to understand it so closely that by the byproduct of understanding the belief, we see that it's a fallacy. Just by our attempt to be so intimate with it, we see it has no foundation. And as soon as you can't find something that this belief can stand on, it will let go of you. You don't let go of it. You're just seeing what's actually true versus what's not true, and then healing happens.
Right.
And then we sit in the question of, okay, you've been living in this your whole life, right? This is the context from which you live. Hence this program trying to protect you over and over. Who would you be in the absence of this belief? And we go back to that same memory. Now be in the same exact memory without the belief that you're not loved. And who would you be towards your mom? And they start to see a whole different side of them. And it might be, man, she didn't believe me. Maybe I would start to see she's really afraid of it being true. Maybe I'd see like that maybe she was feeling ashamed of that possibly being true. Maybe I'd want to hug her. Maybe I would just be okay with her not believing me, and I would just take myself out of the situation. And wow, that version of it, the only difference is not the reality. It's my story of the reality. And look, there's a whole new me. And the assignment is you live that now. Be that now, and you'll resolve this conflict. And in fact, the only reason you attracted this conflict from the soul level, I would assert, is to learn this specific lesson because you're destined to be you, and it's you without this story. And so your disease leads you to your destiny.
Totally.
And when you embrace the entire process, you realize, I never was abandoned. Actually, I created this to get in touch with this context that I'm not loved fundamentally, so I can experience myself in the absence of that context, which is an entire new reality that is everything that I've been looking for my entire life. I've been looking in relationships and money and and now all of that holds no weight, and I can actually experience freedom. Thank you, experience. And when we can thank it, laugh at it, we've healed.
Right.
But we can only do that when we've seen the actual truth.
That is alchemy. That's
100%.
it right there, man.
100%.
Oh man. I have so many threads that I want to pull on with that. What I love about this is that it is really, truly placing your healing on you, making it 100% your responsibility. And it's not like in a shame, like, oh, you need to do that. It's more like, no, have compassion for yourself for not understanding that this is purely a creation of your mind. Again, aside from like getting your leg chopped off, which again, that event is now over if you did 2 years ago. So how can you resolve the situation now? Because the instance of it happening is no longer present, but that's an extreme example. In most cases, when we're talking about emotional things, we're talking about things related to the psyche, something damaging our psyche emotionally. That event has passed. It's no longer present. The only thing that's present now is your story surrounding it. And yes, I understand that it's stored at a cellular level, that your nervous system health, et cetera, et cetera. I get all that. But irrespective of that, it is 100% on you to resolve it. And it's looking at it and examining whether the initial belief that preceded that was true in the first place.
Right, exactly.
And that is the most important thing. Yes, that's dissolving it rather than resolving it, which you've said. I don't want to take your term. That's you. But the other thing too about having to find I've experienced this myself doing childhood trauma work with some people. Having to find the original thing can be a mind fuck and create some sort of like shame surrounding like, oh, I can't even get to the normal thing. Oh, I'm never going to be able to fucking heal this because I can't even find this. Oh, I need to go see like a past life regression therapist, which I'm not saying that there's no positive effects of that, or someone who can get into my subconscious and find when I was 6 months old and I experienced this, whatever. Those things have positive effects, but this idea that our healing is predicated on either us being able to find the person and have a conversation with them. Maybe they're dead. Maybe they're not available to have a conversation. So is it that you actually need that? Can it be helpful? Yes, it can. But do you need it to heal? No, you absolutely do not. Or you need to find the exact event? No, you don't need to find the exact event, because that can, like I said, create a mind fuck in and of itself, where you're just perpetually not healing because then you create a story around yourself not being able to find the initial thing. And I experienced that very acutely during, again, I bring my water fast up so much on my podcast now, 'cause it's just like, it's like a running joke because of how much I bring it up. It's so funny. But it was so transformative for me because I realized that like just feeling the emotions associated with whatever I was present with and then examining the original belief, both of those at the same times, had tremendous impact and changed me forever thereafter. It really, truly did.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this episode, please consider sharing it with at least one friend or family member who you think could benefit from hearing it. You help us grow and reach more people by sharing it with those around you. Also, be sure to head to the show notes to check out our membership offerings, membership marketplace, and more. We all know that Big Ag is poisoning our food supply, and Big Pharma's so-called medicine is straight up poison. What most people aren't aware of, though, is that most supplements are also filled with artificial sweeteners, dyes, GMOs, glyphosate, and a host of other toxic ingredients, even many of the more natural supplements. My good buddy James Benefico dedicated his life to crafting the world's cleanest, most nutritious organic supplements after a pre-workout energy drink caused heart palpitations so severe that he almost landed up in the ER. Organic Muscle was born, revolutionizing sports nutrition by using exclusively non-GMO ingredients from USDA organic farms. Since then, tens of thousands of people, including myself, have leveled up their fitness and their health with Organic Muscle's award-winning natural pre-workout. There's no jitters, no heart palpitations, no itchy skin, just nourishing organic food and herb-based ingredients for clean, sustained energy, strength, endurance, and recovery. Numerous studies have shown that Tonka Ali is the most effective herb in the world for naturally boosting testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone levels are depleting all over the world because of what's put in the food supply, what we're exposed to. Organic Muscle has the world's first fully organic Tonka Ali supplement. I only support and promote things that I actually use, and I can say I legitimately use Organic Muscle products. Use code FORWARD15 at checkout for 15% off at organicmuscle.com. Okay, so now I want to talk about what you call dissolving a conflict rather than resolving a conflict, because resolving a conflict, that's a German new medicine term for resolving the emotions associated with a symptom that brings you into the healing phase or gets you off of a track, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the distinction between resolve and dissolve?
Yeah. So I'll give an example of resolving. My dad had territory anger for maybe 10 years at our childhood home. And what that looked like was indigestion and heartburn. So he was like taking Tums. I remember this growing up. We always had an issue with a neighbor. It was like my brother was playing the drums too loud, and then my neighbor would be really upset and call the cops. And my dad just had a short fuse. So like constantly.
Would you get mad at the neighbors or you guys?
The neighbor.
Dude, it's so funny because I had the same thing growing up too, where this is so ridiculous, but this is our family. We were playing basketball in our front yard and it was too loud according to our brand new neighbor. And we looked up like the city regulations on the decibels, and then we looked up like a decibel for like a basketball bouncing. We were like, nope, this doesn't meet the city's requirements. So we just like played basketball harder outside. It was really fucked up actually. But you just try to go to sleep and it's like 11:30. But okay, so yeah,
Well, yeah, my dad, he would just get really pissed off at our neighbors, and that was like a constant thing. So he had this indigestion, and he had to take Tums. And traditional GNMers, and this is where I don't necessarily agree, or I just see it as very outdated, are so materially based, even though GNM points to the origin of all disease as non-material, the psyche. You can't contain the psyche, right? You could say the psyche is like the action of the brain or its mind.
But do they attribute the brain scans to be like this is quite literally a product of the brain, or is it that the brain is just a map or a representation of what the immaterial psyche is experiencing?
I would say the latter.
The latter. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, the brain is showing what's happening in the psyche.
Got it.
In a sense.
Okay.
In terms of DHS, it's obviously not going to, the psyche is so complex. I don't know if you can actually capture and fully understand someone's psyche from one single print. But so traditional GNMers might say, okay, the resolution, how to resolve, is go talk to that neighbor and make some agreement where he doesn't get upset and you don't get angry anymore, and you create a win-win. Now that's great. That's like It's kind of profound too, where you're like, God, my health issue, if I just go talk to my neighbor, it's gone. And I go confront, and that's healthy. It's like people resolving their issues with each other. That's fine. But that doesn't equate to freedom. And if I'm going to commit myself to any body of work, it has to lead to freedom, not just temporary band-aids. Because see, what happens is, and this is where it gets into more of a spiritual context, what's responsible for them being around each other in the first place? You know, my dad, this isn't the first neighbor that brought up this conflict with my dad. This is his life.
Wow.
And I guarantee that guy has had the same thing. So this is where we get into conversations of like karma and attracting,
yeah.
right, physics, right? What I
Yeah.
put out is what I get back, or in the Bible, what I reap, what I sow.
Right.
So it's like, if your resolution doesn't mean if you're resolving without transcending the karmic pattern that causes you suffering, then you're just putting a Band-Aid on something that's inevitably going to recreate itself. And I'm not in the business of that kind of resolution, because the other alternative would be, well, just move. And what happens? We see this in dating all the time. If you don't resolve from one relationship, you end up having the same exact problems in the next relationship.
Or the other example that you brought up is, oh, well, this one would be too hard to resolve, so just don't keep it in conflict active phase. Can you give an example of where like that is what Dr. Hammer shared might be the appropriate steps to take?
And I get it, because people have died from the specific conflict territory loss. More common in men. Let's say a man loses I'll use the example that Dr. Hammer actually prescribed. He lost him and his wife split because she couldn't bear children. That wasn't his territory loss. He drove by years later. She ended up moving in with a neighbor and actually being able to conceive a child. He saw her with the child, and boom, then he had territory loss. Wait, I want her to be my woman because she can carry a child, but she has a child with someone else. Now I feel like I've lost my woman, because again, his ideal woman wasn't there initially, but then she became his ideal woman. So he associated with that with, his territory. No, this is the woman I want, and I can't have her. And that affects the heart. And so for years, he was conflict active with territory loss. So he'd have, heart palpitations, heart pain, on and off, high cholesterol. And he goes to Dr. Hammer. This is 3 years conflict active. Dr. Hammer said, because of the cell loss in your heart, and I don't remember if it's the heart wall or the artery, but because of the cell loss, if you resolve this right now, the blood pressure and the healing phase will be too much for your heart. The heart attack, that's part of the healing phase, will kill you. So instead of trying to resolve this conflict, I want you for the next 20 years to drive past his house and see her with their child and get a little angry about it, and keep this mildly conflict active so you can live for 20 years. Because if you resolve this, you're sure to die. And number one, I would say, you can't know if someone's going to die before they're dead. Mm-hmm. Just simple. Like, you're playing God at that point. Even if you have data, it's very rare that anything is completely absolute. Yeah. Right. So
data can help inform about reality, but data is not reality itself.
Right. And G&M still can't totally categorize miraculous healings where people have seen tumors literally within seconds on scans, ultrasounds, dissolve. Mm-hmm. That's not documented. Mm-hmm. And that's like a rapid healing phase. No one's ever in G&M like, oh yeah, your healing phase is 12 seconds, and this is biologically why. So there's always room for what we can't understand. Totally. And so in how I would perceive that situation is, okay, if you're living to not die, you're already dead. You're not alive. You're not living. You're alive, but you're not living. Mm-hmm. If the purpose of your life is to avoid dying. So would I ever give someone that advice? No. Mm-hmm. I would tell them, okay, this could happen, and I would rather support you in working through the fear of death and being free of that fear and living free than living like a slave for 20 years. But that's up to them and their values. And if you want to work with me, that's where we're going to go,
And so in working with you, this is a perfect segue actually, because you've taken the German New Medicine framework, which is incredible. And when it comes to dissolving conflicts, you have brought in ISI, and that's something you had been doing previously. So now you've just discovered G&M, and it just pairs perfectly with that.
Yeah.
So can you describe, you got into it a little bit, but what ISI is and where you learned that, and how Byron Katie also helped inform your work and things like that?
Yeah. So I'll give this example with my dad and the territory anger. So traditional, like I just create two camps of like the work, right? You have the somatic world, and I'm going to go to the extremes, like the pure feeling somatic world.
Right.
And then you
just
have like
feeling it in your body.
Yeah, just dance, just shake it off and you'll be fine. And like some of that works. And it's great because if you've been under the context, I'm too much, I can't feel my feelings, it's dangerous, it's not allowed, then that's going to be a huge breakthrough. And that's massive. But it's like letting a pipe create a lot of tension and be on the verge of exploding, learning skills to release the pressure, but not getting to the source of the pressure buildup in the first place. So then a dependency can form and you can go, I just need to keep practicing. I need to do my feeling practice. I need to do more breath work. I need to do something to feel to then come back to homeostasis. But again, emotion is already down the chain of causation. You're not dealing with absolute cause.
What is
when
the
you're
cause of this emotion?
Why? Yeah, the emotion is feedback.
Right.
It's there because of a belief informing it, and not just a belief, a core identity.
Yeah.
And I distinguish between a core identity and just your day-to-day perceptions or beliefs. I can believe, oh, that's bad, and if I change that belief, it's not going to change much against my sense of self. Oh, okay, maybe it's good. I can believe that. But if what's informing that opinion doesn't change, which is an entire worldview that answers questions like, who am I? And what is God? What is the nature of happiness? And what is the nature of suffering? All of us have answers to those questions, whether we know it or not. We've adopted them somewhere, and it forms a core worldview that then informs our beliefs, feelings, thoughts, and actions. So somatics goes a little more up the chain than just mindset work, which is like Tony Robbins' 1990s personal development. So if I'm just trying to shift my thinking conscious mind, I might have some temporary relief and be able to manage a little better. Now, if I go deeper and I'm starting to really fully feel through my emotions, well, I'm going to release a lot of pent up stored emotion. That's incredible. But if I go one layer deeper to the core sense of self, that again are a result of all those questions that I've answered, probably through my culture, probably through my parents, probably completely unconsciously. If I don't alter the core sense of who I am, I'm going to keep recreating the same emotions, the same thoughts, the same actions, and ultimately the same results. So back to my dad, resolution would look like move out or go have a conversation. Now we're dealing with the very last part of the chain, action, and maybe thinking, oh, see it as an opportunity. Okay. So we're at the like level, I don't know what that would be. Identity, emotion, belief, thought, action. Yeah. Like level 3 or level 4 and level 3. We're dealing at the very end of the chain. Now, where we'd have to go, I'll use this example on my dad, is okay, he's angry. What is he angry about? Anger is typically used to try to change or control a situation. I'm angry because I want it this way, but it's this way, right? It's like when someone brings your food out and you get the wrong food, people get really angry. Where's my food? Why are they doing that? They want the right food, right? But there's a deeper level to that. So, okay, you're angry because he's coming onto our property and yelling at you, right? Well, my dad grew up in a household where his dad was very verbally abusive and was drunk and yelling and was very scary and intimidating. And if your dad is scary and intimidating and attacking you verbally, what must that mean about you as a person? And if my dad were to go to that level and find some core belief, I'm not loved, I'm not, and again, like we said before, identity is usually an I'm not or an I am, but I'm not is very common. I'm not wanted, I'm not good enough. Then he's really in direct relationship with that core identity. The core identity is what he's having conflict with, not the neighbor. And the way you prove it is once you recognize the core identity, put them in your imagination. I think this is one of the main reasons we have imagination, is to go back to a situation and completely re-experience it, because our brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. It's like the basketball players that they practice shooting in their imagination over and over for days. And then the people that are actually shooting are shooting for days. And then when they go and see who improved more, the ones that did it in their imagination improved more because they imagine never missing.
I forgot where was that?
It was Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, it was Joe Dispenza. I think I read that in Biology Belief, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or is that's not Joe Dispenza.
That's Bruce
That's
Lipton.
Bruce Lipton. No, I read it in whatever. I read it in a Joe Dispenza book.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say and this, again, how you prove it is, let's say I were to get to that belief, help my dad get to that belief, and he was able to see that it's not true, that there's nothing about him that's fundamentally unlovable, that was a story he arrived with that automatically was assumed in that situation to be true, that unconsciously caused him to pull his love away from his dad. And actually that was the only conflict that there ever was. And so once he sees that, he might have this massive release of tension because the emotion is being generated by that identity. Yeah. So when that cracks, boom, you'll have an entire cascade of release. Then I go, okay, Dad, go back to that situation with your neighbor. Who would you be in the absence of the story that you're not loved, you're not enough, and that you need, he might have been projecting dad onto neighbor. You need his approval, you need his love, you need him to be compassionate and understanding in order to feel enough. Who would you be in the absence of that? Well, he'd probably be very compassionate and understanding towards the neighbor, and it would be a totally different experience. That's the definition of conflict resolved. You're in the same situation, but there's been such a fundamental shift, you can't perceive it as a conflict. That's how you know the identity has changed. You can put them back in and they respond as if they're a totally different person. Mm-hmm. So we're not just resolving symptoms. You're becoming an actual different person. Like your personality has to fundamentally change. And that's, again, the gift of the disease is the personality change that life is trying to get you to do is the more free, loving, compassionate version of you. You can't get to healing. Like healing and that, healing and that state are synonymous. And that personality, that version of you, they're synonymous. Mm-hmm. So many people just want to take a pill without having to do the work to become the person that's incompatible with the conflict.
So with German new medicine, what is I understand that it's different, like conflict to conflict, but in general, what is the approach to resolve a conflict?
With German new medicine?
Yeah.
So, they can work with perception. They will, it's like I was working with a GNM practitioner and I was talking about a crypto investment that I made with Voyager app. I don't know if you were aware a year and a half ago.
Yeah, like 30,000 taken from your
crazy like that, right? And that was a morsel. It was like I couldn't digest it. And he just goes, well, just see it as a gift, as a lesson. And it's like easier said than done. Right. If there's something deeper than just a perception, which there always is.
Yeah.
Now, for some people that might work. If that really lands, it just depends on the psyche. This is why your resolutionary path is so individualized because it's based on what works for that psyche. Some people it's family constellation. Some people it's, internal family systems. It just depends on what is compatible to the psyche. But the majority of resolution is based in the physical world. Mm-hmm. So when I had a GNM practitioner read my scan, he goes, I could see from your scan here about a year ago, you were with a woman that you really loved and you wanted her to be the mother of your children, and she left you and you felt really devalued. I was like, that's literally exactly what happened. He goes, okay, your resolution is just go get into another relationship where there's an equal amount of love or more, and then this will all resolve. And I'm sitting there like, well, yeah, like, duh, that's going to happen. Like a resolved person would find themselves
right,
there.
As a result.
It would be a side effect.
Right.
So a lot of the GNM world, they've exchanged cause and effect. Mm-hmm. They're putting cause where effect should be. They're going, the cause of your healing is the relationship. No. The cause of your healing is what you need to digest or resolve, that then the effect becomes you attract and find yourself in more loving relationships. But that's the result of the cause. Totally. That's not the cause.
Totally.
So again, and you see this in the material.
I think like what will happen is you, from a misaligned perspective, looking outside of yourself to resolve the conflict. Like, the only or the best way for me to heal this conflict is for me to find another thing outside of myself to make me feel better about it. That doesn't
and you
sound
might
like
have
freedom.
resolution,
Right.
but then as soon as they leave you, then you're back to the same health issues.
Right.
So it's not freedom, and it depends on the other person. So it's not freedom. Inquiry puts cause and effect in their proper place.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it does.
Yeah. Have you shared this with other like German new medicine type people? With respect to
I'm starting to do
inquiry?
a series of workshops on it, and some of them are coming in my waiting room and watching in and what's going on here. So yeah, I haven't necessarily like been like, hey, check this out.
Yeah.
There's a couple. I really love Freya's work.
Yeah.
And
she's great.
Some other GNMers have asked.
She also follows no one. I swear that's just a German
It
new
might be a
medicine
GNM
thing.
It might be, yeah.
You don't follow
It's a
anyone on
trend.
social media. Freya does it. Melissa Sell does it.
It's biological. No, it is something that I'm passionate about. I do want to bring, we need a resolutionary process. We need a change in our approach to resolving that implies a totally different sense of self as an end result. So this becomes much more meaningful than just change your environment and heal your symptoms. No, this is a process. I've been saying the most gross level, the physical, contains the most divine. And it's like the deeper I go into what's happening in my body and symptom wise, the more clearly I'm going to see my psyche. And when I resolve what's happening in my psyche, on the other side of that, I meet my soul, my truest self. It's like, imagine a window with light, sun going through it, and part of it has been opaque, that part of the psyche that's being suppressed, the identity that says I'm not enough, I'm not wanted, whatever it is. And so you're getting this image of light, which is your body, your life, your entire experience. As soon as that opaqueness is cleaned off of the psyche, you get to actually experience who you really are in the absence of that constraint. And that's like wearing blue tinted glasses for 40 years. If I were to ask you, what color do you see? You wouldn't even be able to tell me it's blue because all you know is blue.
Right.
You just go, what do you mean? This is normal.
Mm-hmm.
You take those off, you're a 1-year-old. That version of you is 1 day old, and you get to have an entire different experience of reality. That's what the symptoms are an invitation to. It's not move out or resolve this. It's like, no, there's in the truth of who you are, you can't be conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so your conflicts are pointing to where you're suppressing the truth of who you are. So there's a contrast that's beautiful with GNM, that as you identify symptoms and resolve conflicts through that contrast of experiencing really who you're not, what your natural state is not, you get to discover what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that full circle process of resolution is much deeper than, just trying to resolve a conflict. And I think until you're ready to go there, you can experience resolution, but not freedom. And who wants that?
Right. It's a complete recalibration of your being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a totally different perspective. You talked about, like we were talking about before, I guess, that from this perspective, it's not that the use of herbs or, like you're dealing with an anemia conflict, like a conflict that is presenting as symptoms of anemia right now, right? And it's not that you can't take herbs or adopt a certain diet or do certain detoxes to help facilitate that, but it's that it's a complete shift in understanding and mechanism of action of what those things are doing. Because obviously the mainstream and much of the functional medicine community, much of the holistic health community thinks of symptoms as bad. So when they're doing an herbal cleanse, as an example, they're like, oh, this is helping me to stop the symptoms, right? Because they point to the symptoms as bad. And you may still end up taking those herbs, but from the understanding that this is not intended to stop my symptoms. This is intended to help me, just help my body do the process that it is doing to resolve this conflict and heal, right? And those are two completely different approaches. So with that, we were talking about we were talking about plant medicine a little bit before we clicked record. I was like, dude, no, save this for the recording. So I look at a lot of people in, especially like in the Austin community, I'd say, but like just speaking to the spiritual holistic health crossover community in general, that are looking at plant medicine as the thing to help them do the work. Like that is the act of doing the work, where I sort of reframe that as like, no, plant medicine, if anything, helps you see the things in the work that needs to be done, rather. Yeah. So how, like in your experience, if you don't mind sharing, of like just using plant medicine to help present some of the things that you're dealing with and help uproot things to resolve conflicts.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about my 5-MAO experience,
yeah.
which, man, I mean, to some degree, I'm still integrating it.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, if you've done 5-MAO, you know, everyone that has done 5-MAO DMT has had the same experience. It's not like, it's not psychedelic. It's not from the plant kingdom. It's from the animal kingdom.
You're right.
So think of like these kingdoms as degrees of complexity, right? It's like mineral kingdom, one mineral. It's like the most basic entity or form on the planet. And then those minerals mix with other things and plants, and that's more complex. And then animals. So it's a totally different category and experience than anything in the plant world. And I thought, I'm experienced. I can handle this. And I mean, first of all, I became everything.
Straight up.
Yeah, that's it. And I still am. I'm not back. I'm stuck. No. It was so disorienting, but in the most beautiful way, to where I never lost the sense of me, but there was no reference point. There's no front, back, up or down. There's no borders. It's complete, perfect peace. And it's the most familiar experience of your life. You're laughing at how familiar absolute infinity actually is.
Really?
Like, of course.
Because that's what we are. That's where we come from, right?
It's 100%. Like, of course.
Right.
And every conflict you have in that state, you can't have. How could infinity be conflicted? Right. What opposes it? Nothing. What's outside of it? Nothing. What can threaten it? Nothing. So this is my theory. Every conflict was resolved instantaneously. And that rocked me in my healing phase. I mean, I felt like I almost died. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I had chronic diarrhea. I was having seizures and panic attacks every 20 minutes for 2 weeks because I went into that hyper conflicted. Right. People that go into that without a lot of conflicts, they're probably fine. Right. And they might have a tough integration. Do you think
you were looking at that as like, oh, I need this?
That's exactly what it was. Right. I was desperate, which never go into a plant ceremony desperate for healing. Right. And my constitution was shot. I mean, it was not a great decision, but I learned a lot. So anyway, in coming back, I come back and it's like, I'm thinking of, at the time, it was my ex and money and my career and like everything that were the source of my conflicts. And it's laughable. It's laughable, all of it. And even a question like, what's the nature of reality? What's the purpose? Even all those were laughable. I'm just like, what's the point? That's ridiculous. Like, it's infinite. What? Like, I can't even ask the questions. And it was just profound peace. Right. And then for like 2 weeks, chronic diarrhea, seizure, all of it. It was one of the hardest experiences of my life. And it's one of those things you're like, how many people on the planet have actually experienced this? Feel pretty alone. So I probably had a bunch of more DHSs just from those 2 weeks of like, I'm going to die. What did I do? Did I mess my brain up? So
were you in like a state of psychosis too?
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, I just was like basically doing box breath all the time just to try to calm down. Just, I'm okay.
That is horrible. I'm laughing, but that is like,
well, it's an actual experience of dying.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't move, turn around. It was just pure infinite.
That's what everyone I know who's done 5-MAO.
And when you come back, like I thought I was moving. I was like, I had this freak out moment where I was in between worlds, where I was like complete, infinite, perfect peace. And then the thought occurred to me, where's my body? And then boom, I saw my ego appear, which was like an energetic form. It didn't look like me, but I knew it. Like I looked at it and I was like, and this is everyone in the ceremony is just watching me lie there. And I'm just, like on the floor, just like kind of moving. First words that I say are, there you are. Like, you little bastard. Like that with that
Did
tone.
you say audibly?
I said it. Yeah. And they're like, what? and I see my ego, but I had this experience of like, I'm over here, my ego's over there,
Yeah.
but there's no I that's over here. So where am I? Truth was I was here and now,
right.
but I just, because of an absence of a body and like touch, like where am I? So I have this incredible terror of like, I'm disconnected from myself. I'm in between. I'm stuck out in something I can't understand. And it was like terror. And I'm trying to beat my chest. I'm trying to feel something. And in real life, I'm pounding my chest. And I'm like going like full gorilla silverback mode. Just goblin mode.
I can just imagine being someone there. Like the first thing you say is, "There you are," and then
and then I start doing like the chanting from like the New Zealand Islander, like the haka. I've never done it in my life, but bro, I couldn't not do it. It was happening through me. And I'm like hitting, and I'm doing all of the stuff, and everyone is, they told me after, they're like, it was actually dope. It was incredible. Like, it was a great performance. But I did it for 2 minutes straight. Just, and then I finally like can feel like a feather touching my skin. Like I can kind of feel my body again. But I'm hitting it really hard, and I'm feeling it like nothing. And reality starts to like come back in, and then I completely relax and start laughing and crying and being like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
That was the most beautiful, incredible, and most scary thing I've ever experienced in my life. But I was just left in profound peace and completion. There's no words. There's no questions. It's okay.
You're piercing the veil in a very deep way.
Yeah. And it stays in your system for a few weeks. And so those next couple of weeks, I was still kind of in between in between the worlds. Like I was hanging out with my buddy Nathaniel, and I'm freaking out. And like in between states of bliss and terror. And like he would just walk by me and just like drop a one-liner. And because I was so sensitive, it would rock me. He walked by me and he just goes, there's nothing outside of God. And I had like a Kundalini thing. And I never I'm not into Kundalini, but what I've heard about it, like I'm just like, ah! And like I have an orgasm, bro. literally. And I just take off again. And then the littlest,
you like blast off into that experience again.
Not in that moment, but over the next 2 weeks, 4 more times, I'm just going to sleep. And then all of a sudden, poof, I'm everything. And then I come back. Finally resolved the last time when I was needing to be taken care of because I was having German medicine terms, probably like 5 epicrises at a time. I was having heart pains, so probably some mild heart attacks. I was having indigestible morsel epicrisis, which is diarrhea. And I didn't know anything about German new medicine at the time. I was having like seizures, so that's an epicrisis. And panic attacks, that's an epicrisis. So like I'm having all of these healing symptoms in the most intense way I've ever had them. And I'm like, I'm dying.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, I need someone to help me, right? I don't know what to do.
Right.
After a couple of weeks, I started feeling a bit better. I'm like, okay, I need to be on my own. And I go back home. And my first night, I'm like, I just have this feeling. As soon as I go lay down, I'm going to go back. And I just started calling it going infinite. I'm going to go infinite again tonight. And because of the fear around it, of what happened that first time, it was always nerve-wracking. It's like, I'm going to totally dissolve. It's not casual,
Well, there's a reason we're experiencing this. There's a reason for it. So like that experience can give us a contextual foundation to be like, oh, this is our true nature.
Right.
But it's, again, clear we're supposed to be experiencing this.
Exactly.
So it's like, God dang it, like my individuated portion of the whole cannot continue to experience this because that's not what it's supposed to do.
Right.
It's too disorienting.
Yeah, because there's no continuity in infinity. It's infinity. You can't even infinity, like try to imagine infinity. And what do you imagine? A really big space. That's not infinity. That's a really big space.
Right.
You can't imagine it. You can't conceive of it. So to have that experience and then try to make sense of it from the point of view of a limited mind,
especially with where you were at that point in time, too. Like that, that framed it as well.
Yeah. It's just a limited mind can't comprehend something unlimited. We can only have our limited view. So when you're in both worlds, it could be very disorienting to just have a normal life.
Yeah.
But it finally resolved. I kind of knew it was going to happen. I laid down and I fell asleep, and I had this dream of this like angel taking me to this like Akashic Records, I'd call it that in hindsight, but like a auditorium with all these files. And I said, find your own file. And I opened it, and it was just a doorway down really deep into the earth. And I followed it, and there was this like angelic music, and it sounded very similar to what I heard in the trip, like this beautiful tone. And I go to this root, like really see now in hindsight, it's like the core of myself.
Yeah.
And there's a table there that's perfectly contoured to my body to like sit in and I knew as soon as I got into it, I would go infinite. And first I said no. It's like classic hero's journey. I'm going to refuse the call. And I left. And then as I'm leaving, I just hear the voice like, the only way out of this is through. You have to get really comfortable in that space. So I turn around, I go back in, I put all my body parts in, they fit perfectly. I know as soon as my head's going to hit, I'm going to go. And I just lay it down, and I go infinite in the dream. I come back in my bed, and then I feel it one more time. If I close my eyes again, it's going to happen again. I just knew. And I closed my eyes, and it happened again. And that time I was like poetic and dramatic with myself. I'm like, all right, just kill me. I'm absolutely surrendering to this. If this happens every night, it's going to happen. And just boom. And that last one. There was no fear anymore. It was just pure bliss. It was like, oh, and it's never happened again.
Wow.
But anyway, in terms of GNM, like, let's take it all back, is like, I don't think with the exception of that, it did actually resolve my conflicts, but they all came back.
Right.
Because I didn't have the conscious understanding as to why they were resolved.
Yeah. You were blasted
case by
out.
case.
Right. Exactly. Because you were looking at it from a lens of not up there.
Yeah, but then when my human form came back,
right.
So did all of those point of views that have been ingrained in my mind. So like as soon as my identity came back, I was like, no, I'm still pissed at this and that, even if I'm infinite in so I still had to unpack for that, over the next 6 to 8 months, each of those conflicts. So again, nothing can do it for you. No. It could highlight, and it's great to get reflection. I'd say one of the best ways to help resolve your conflicts is get people who know what they're doing to just reflect back to you what you're saying, how you're seeing life, so you could see what you can't see. And now I've been on this, like, I'm excited to just do it all sober. Yeah. That was after that, I was like, I'm done. Yeah. Because even in that next week, everything I was ruminating on, I was like, it's the same shit I was ruminating on before. I am aware of all of this. I just wasn't honest with myself to just go, oh yeah, this is a problem, and I am ruminating on it. It just brought it so to the surface, but do I actually need that permission, or can I just be more honest with myself?
Right. And that's where you look at that experience with animal plant medicine as, yes, it's incredible to help reveal more of what you need to do. Like, and if you come at it with that understanding beforehand, then I feel like it can be very helpful for you. And then people talk about going into plant medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or 5-MeO DMT or literally anything else, and coming on the back end of that, like having astral demons and things attached to them. And I bring this up because I've just finished this book called The Red Lion, which is one of the most profound books on alchemy I've ever read. And it essentially follows this guy through multiple lifetimes after he killed a guy and stole the elixir of life, drank it, and he was not spiritually adept. So he was immediately immersed in the astral realms and the physical realm at the same time, and then immediately aware of all of his past lives.
Wow.
And he wasn't ready for it. And then it follows him through lifetimes working it off. And what's so profound about it is that multiple times it's revealed to him that all of these things, even these astral demons that are swirling around him that he can see, are all a creation of his mind. And now he has to do the work to resolve those. And it again just comes back to, somehow tying it back to GNM, just like self-ownership. It's all a product of this. Yeah. And we have to resolve this.
Absolutely.
I'm not pointing to the physical thing, but you know what I mean? Like what's going on inside of us. And it all has to be resolved there. And then once he does that in the book over time, like those demons are gone once he resolves the things going on within himself. It's all creation of the mind.
Yep. You could think of it in terms of a mirror. It's like if you're staring at your reflection and you're sad and you're like, okay, reflection, you change and then I'll change. We'll never change. Replace that with entity, situation, circumstance, relationships you attract, money, any object that you can perceive. Replace it with that mirror image. And then all of a sudden you smile, which is another word for acceptance or digesting an experience. And the reflection has no choice but to smile. It doesn't have an independent mind.
Yeah.
It's reflecting your mind.
That's a really good analogy. Damn. Man, this has been a fun conversation. Holy shit. Share with everyone some of the work you're doing. You're taking clients and stuff like that for G&M and ISI.
Ever since I started the G&M, oh man, it's been so fun because we've had experiences. I don't know if I shared it in this podcast or if it was just with you earlier, but where I'm working with someone and they're telling me about their dad, and I can just, through the description of his psyche, I could tell he probably has right knee pain. And then she goes, oh yeah, he had a knee replacement. And, I'll talk to a woman and she's like, yeah, it's my right shoulder and my right elbow. And it's like, oh, you're not feeling like you're underperforming as a partner and like you're feeling rejected as, in your relationship. It's like, oh my God, and that's 100%. And
it's like almost makes you like psychic in a way.
Yeah. And so it's been so fun because people can't hide from their symptoms. Symptoms are observable. We can hide from our thoughts and our emotions, but that final, most gross level, it's like, okay, I can't deny I'm having this symptom. So I love G&M because I can lure people out of hiding. And then once they come into my world, it's, okay, let's get to this core identity statement that's informing the way you're perceiving. We're not changing how you're perceiving. We're changing this identity that tells you perceiving this way makes sense. And so been doing a lot of one-on-one sessions. I still have those available, but man, over the last year now, I can, in like 30 or 40 minutes, typically find the thing for them and then they have some sort of release. And again, you have to be really honest. You have to be courageous and you have to be ready. Not everyone resolves, but a lot of the people that come, probably like 70% of people that come to me are ready. So they're really willing to be honest with themselves, and we'll have an opening, a releasing of core identity. And I'll go, okay, you're probably gonna have night sweats tonight. You might have diarrhea tomorrow morning. And 8, 9 out of 10 times it happens. And they message me at 3 a.m. I'm in night sweats tonight. It's like, well, yeah, you don't need the program anymore that's been protecting you from being abandoned. You don't need that water. Right. So all the water is going to leave you. And it started like there's kind of a formula that's emerging that I'm calling the circle of inquiry, where it's like you start on this point. If you go through the whole circle, honestly, you'll resolve. And I'm putting together a framework that I could take larger groups through now. And it's going to be called the circle. So That's going to start probably in the next month or so. And
I'll throw your website and stuff in the show notes so people can find it when they watch or listen. I
also have a free Telegram group where I just riff on things. I'm just like, I have a section on God and truth. I have a section on G&M. I have a section on inquiry. And I just like, as I'm inspired, just like fill that up. And that's a great resource. I also tell stories, all of like the healing that happens with my clients. I tell the stories in that chat, and that's a helpful resource as well.
Awesome. Love you, dude. This was awesome. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Dude, it was so awesome.
So many of us dream of buying some land, growing our own food, and becoming self-sufficient away from a society that's gone completely mad. What if it's easier than we think to make that dream a reality? Siblings Jamie and Shelby over at Living the Off-Grid Dream have cracked the code to getting land and living a life of freedom. They'll show you where to find land for $1 down, that's right, $1 down, with low monthly payments, as well as how to structure your vision for a homestead, retreat center, regenerative farm, or community. It's one thing to have food, water, and land security, but it's an entirely different thing to have the financial security to buy the land and build it out in a way that aligns with your goals and aspirations. Their program teaches you how to make enough money on your land to cover all of your costs to make that happen. Plus, they've got you covered with pre-filled out plans to give you inspiration if you're not quite sure what your best move for your land is. And if you're a member of The Way Forward, you get a free one-on-one strategy call with Jamie and Shelby, as well as a free bonus gift. If you want to turn your homesteading, off-grid, or retreat center dreams into a reality, join Living the Off-Grid Dream by clicking the link in the show notes or heading to thewayforward.com/off-grid. In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here.